The ancients never raised their buildings so high. Brunelleschi designs the dome of Florence Cathedral, 1420. In 1418, the wealthy Guild of Wool Merchants of Florence launched a competition to find a design for a dome to complete their unfinished cathedral. The Cattedrale di Santa Maria del Foro, commonly known as Il Duomo. The city of Florence was one of the richest in Italy, a center of banking and trade, and it was on the basis of this wealth that the city could afford to commission a cathedral dome of unprecedented size. This lavish spending on art and architecture would soon be echoed across Italy, as the region's growing prosperity meant that rulers and rich citizens could spend money to beautify their towns and enhance their prestige. The strong economy and deep civic pride in Italy laid the foundations for one of the most significant intellectual movements in history, the Renaissance. Il Duomo. At the time of the competition, Florence's cathedral featured a vast octagonal space toward its eastern end. But since work on the building began in 1296, no one had worked out how to make a dome to cover it. The dome would have to be the largest cupola constructed since the late Roman period, and the guild specified that it should be built without external buttresses, favored by their political rivals in France, Germany, and Milan, and also considered old-fashioned. This seemed an impossible task. The young goldsmith and clockmaker turned architect Filippo Brunelleschi won the competition with his daring plan for a huge 8-sided brick dome, but many doubted that he would be able to construct it. The main problem was being able to support the structure in such a way that it did not spread and collapse under its own weight. Brunelleschi's ingenious solution was to construct two concentric domes, an inner supporting dome and a larger outer one. The domes were then joined together with huge brick arches and a complex interlocking system of chains made from rings of stone and wooden beams that were attached by iron clamps to prevent the dome from expanding outwards. The result, which was finally completed in 1436, remains the largest masonry dome in the world. Combining the style of antiquity with new engineering techniques, it exhibited the blend of ancient wisdom and modern knowledge that typified the Renaissance. The Renaissance in Italy. Meaning rebirth, the Renaissance was a movement that started in Italy and began to spread across Europe from the mid-14th century. Its roots lay in the rediscovery of the culture of ancient Greece and Rome, and it influenced all the arts, as well as science and scholarship. Painters, sculptors, and architects broke free from the traditions of medieval art. They visited the monuments of ancient Rome, looking at classical statues and the carvings on Roman buildings, and created works of art in the classical style. This new movement inspired architects, such as Leon Battista Alberti and Brunelleschi, and a wave of great artists, including Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci. Most of these figures were active in many fields. Brunelleschi was a sculptor and engineer as well as an architect. Michelangelo painted, sculpted, and wrote poetry, while da Vinci's achievements spanned both the arts and the sciences. Renaissance painters and sculptors sought to represent the physical world in a more realistic way than their medieval predecessors. They valued anatomical accuracy and developed scientific methods of illustrating perspective. As in classical art, there was more focus on human beauty and the nude. There was also a revival of interest in classical learning, which was influenced by Greek scholars from the Byzantine Empire, who settled in Italy when Constantinople, the empire's capital, fell in 1453. The émigrés brought with them ancient Greek literary, historical, and philosophical texts, which had been lost to the West, and taught the Italians Greek so they could read and translate the works. This led to the emergence of Renaissance humanism in Italy, which involved studying the humanities, grammar, rhetoric, history, philosophy, and poetry, and, more broadly, a higher regard for the dignity and potential of the human race. At the time of the Renaissance, life, business, and politics in Italy were dominated by a number of powerful city-states, mainly Florence, Milan, Ferrara, and Venice, together with Rome, from where the Pope could exercise great secular, temporal, power as well as being the spiritual head of the Catholic Church. The city-states generated a lot of wealth from trade and, as in the case of Florence, banking. Their ruling families, such as the Gonzaga in Mantua, the D'Este in Ferrara, the Sforza in Milan, and the Medici in Florence, spent lavishly on palaces, churches, and works of art, and became patrons of many great Renaissance artists. These wealthy families also encouraged the revival of classical learning by employing scholars as tutors for their children. In addition, several members of the Medici family became popes. Spread of the Renaissance. From the end of the 15th century, the Renaissance spread from Italy to other parts of Europe and a northern Renaissance emerged. Northern countries, particularly the Netherlands and Germany, produced their own great artists, such as Albrecht Dürer, 1471–1528, and Hans Holbein the Younger, 1497–1543, both gifted realists. Renaissance humanism also spread northward, but northern writers and philosophers, most notably Erasmus of Rotterdam, 1466–1536, tended to place more emphasis on Christianity, education, and reform than their Italian counterparts. The invention of printing using movable type by Johannes Gutenberg in Germany in the 1430s enabled Renaissance ideas to spread even more quickly. Before Gutenberg, the only way printed text was possible was for each page to be carved by hand into a block of wood, but as this was so laborious, books were invariably written out by hand. Gutenberg's method involved arranging individual metal letters and punctuation symbols in lines and pages. When many copies of a page had been printed, the type could be taken apart and reused. He combined this new idea with the existing technology of papermaking and the kind of press used in wine production, and the result was the printing of multiple copies of books for the first time. Gutenberg's invention had a major impact. It meant that books, which had previously been costly and took months to produce, were now easily available and much more affordable, so ideas and information could circulate quickly and reach more people. While the Church had used mostly Latin as its universal language, writers now wrote in their local tongues, and as a result literature in French, English, German, and other languages flourished. In addition, copies of the ancient classics were reproduced in quantity, thus helping to spread ideas that were central to both the Renaissance and humanism. The Renaissance's impact. By the mid-16th century, the influence of the Renaissance was waning in southern Europe, but it lasted slightly longer in the north. However, many great Renaissance works endured and they continued to inspire future generations of painters and architects. Indeed, the long-standing popularity of oil paintings and classical style of architecture, and the rise of humanism, would all have been impossible without the movement that began with Brunelleschi in Florence in the 15th century. Filippo Brunelleschi. Born in Florence, Filippo Brunelleschi, 1377–1446, was the son of a civil servant, who educated Filippo in the hope that he would follow in his footsteps. However, Filippo was artistically talented and instead trained as a goldsmith and a clockmaker before becoming an architect. When he was around 25, he traveled to Rome with his friend, the sculptor Donatello, where he studied the remains of ancient Roman buildings and read the treatise on architecture by the Roman writer Vitruvius. In 1419, he won his first major commission, the design of an orphanage, the Ospedale degli Innocenti in Florence, which, with its arched loggia, is one of the first great Renaissance buildings. A number of other fine works, including chapels in Florentine churches and fortifications for the city, cemented his reputation, but the stunning dome of Il Duomo is his masterpiece. In addition to his buildings, Brunelleschi did important work on the theory of linear perspective, and designed machinery to produce special effects in theatrical productions.